call the May 19th, 2021 Carroll County Board of Commissioners special call meeting to order. I'm going to call on our Deputy County Clerk, Christy McAdams, to call the roll, please.
Chairman Michelle Morgan.
Here.
Sorry. Vice Chairman Tommy Lee.
Here.
District 1 Commissioner Montrell McClendon.
Here.
District 2 Commissioner Clint Chance.
Here.
District 4 Commissioner Steve Fuller.
Here.
District 5 Commissioner Ernie Reynolds.
Here.
District 6 Commissioner George Chambers. Thank you.
I'd like to take a second and acknowledge the passing of Rulon Johnson this past week. Rulon served as the District 5 Commissioner from 1993 to 2000. He is also the father of Darrell Johnson, who serves as our Park Manager at McIntosh Reserve. I'm now going to call on Commissioner Lee to offer our invocation and lead us in our pledge.
Bow your heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father God, thank you for this day. Thank you for all the blessings you give us, dear God. Dear God, thank you for giving us opportunity to be here and conduct the business of the community. And dear God, please help us make the right decisions today. And dear Heavenly Father God, bless our soldiers, bless our first responders, and we give you, your Son, Jesus Christ, all the honor and glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Motion.
Okay.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed?
Vote passed 6-0.
Before the first presentation, I'd like to welcome Theron Gay back to help facilitate our later afternoon events. I'm now going to call on Newton Jennings and Michael Govar and Bobby Stewart from Marsh and McLennan Agency, formerly known as J. Smith Lanier, and they're going to present our property and liability insurance renewal.
Chairman Morgan, thank you. Commissioners, appreciate y'all having us here today. Like I said, I've got Michael Govar with me, one of our loss control engineers, and Bobby Stewart, and I'd be remiss if I'd say Bobby's been running point for the county for over a couple of decades. We keep trying to talk him into staying, but this may be his last year with us, so we're thankful for his support, and if you want to take this first, you're welcome to. All right, good deal. This is regarding the property and casualty renewal that comes up 7/1 of 21 this year. What we're presenting today, I'm going to say, is better news than what we expected. We started the process back in February of this year. Through the communication with our current markets, we were looking at a less than favorable loss ratio, just under 100%. Based on relatively flat exposures, we were looking about a 20 to 30% rate increase right in the nose. Very thankful for the commissioners, county attorneys, department heads. We were able to get involved. Michael was able to get involved this year, implement some training that we used in our marketing process. Two other carriers, we were able to soften that rate increase to about 6% still. I know that's an increase, and I know that's not necessarily what anybody wants to hear, but it's much better than what we expected from where we were sitting about 4 months ago. So you should each have a handout, and if we want to pedal through this, I'm going to take the first 12, 13 pages, and then if it's okay, I'm going to turn the floor over to Michael Govar just to let him talk a little bit about what we've done over the last 12 months from a loss control perspective. Through page 6 is going to be our AM Best rating scale, disclaimers, compensation disclosures, recommended coverages, the things that we're required to put into our proposal. If you want to flip through those, certainly let me know if you have any questions. I can address those. Page 7 is really where the content that we're going to need to drill down in starts. You're going to see a marketing summary on page 7. This is going to outline 19 different carriers that that MMA approached on behalf of the county. Out of those 19 markets, some that were approached directly, some through Seville Associates, a wholesale broker that's been involved with the county for a number of years. It's done a great job for us. 6 of those provided numbers for review. 8 declined for noted reasons. There's still several carriers that are pending, that if we do get something that's better than what we've got in hand, we'll certainly communicate that to you. So there's still some responses that we've not gotten in at this point. Out of the 6 numbers, we're able to compose 3 comprehensive options that we're going to flip through. That we've got to pedal through and make a decision on in regards to which direction we'll go effective 7/1. Any questions on page 7 or 8 on the marketing summary? Page 9 and 10 is just a listing of all 54 locations that coverage is contemplated for Carroll County. Of those 54 locations, you've got a total of $142 million and change for property values. You got $14 million in contractors' equipment. You've got $11 million in our war system. 383 vehicles insured. And there's employee count, roads, there's a number of other options that go into the rating basis, but these are the primary rating basis that your premiums are built off of. I did have the opportunity to speak with some of the commissioners, over the last several months, and I certainly appreciate your time. We did pedal through the main things that your premium is based off of. The 2 primary ones being loss ratios and exposures. Exposures are what they are. You can't change those. You can't decrease or increase the number of vehicles you have. You can't remove buildings, but those are what they are. The loss experience is what we've really tried to work on the last 12 to 18 months, where we have seen some positive trend. So. Page 11 is going to be the first of 3 options. All of these options are, like I said, are going to be comprehensive. They're going to include your general liability, employee benefits liability, public officials, E&O, employment practices liability, law enforcement liability, automobile, property, flood, quake, crime, and excess. The first one with Argonaut. Argonaut is providing options on all of your casualty coverages. So think about that as your third party, everything other than your property. As it's been placed for the last several years, you'll see down towards the bottom where you see federal insurance, Chubb is who we plug in for the property. So you combine those 2 for a total premium of $847,000 and change. To give you a benchmark, your numbers last year for very similar exposures were sitting at $795,000. Any questions on page 11?
Maybe I'm reading this wrong, but why on the summary sheet do we have 7? For Argonaut, we've got 713, 839. Is that in addition to something, how we're getting up with the 847, 727?
Correct, my apologies. So where you have to plug Chubb down at the bottom,
Okay.
Commissioner Chance, where you see the 85,000 plugged in. So Argonaut, they don't have the capacity to write all the property, so we have to go to a separate carrier to do the property. So if you were to isolate the top 3/4 of that, just under what's labeled as Argonaut, that number should match up or be pretty close.
Okay.
But when you plug the Chubb numbers in is what takes it to 847. These 3 options are going to be similar to this, and then Liberty's provided an option. They do have the capacity to write. Your property values are high. You're sitting, just shy of $150 million in values, which is a large number. So a lot of your carriers can't absorb all of that risk. So you have to layer that program or get multiple carriers to do it, which is what we've done here. Now, just cross the T's and dot the I's. You will see Argonaut is providing coverage for the CI and the jail under their option. And then Chubb provides numbers for everything else. For what it's worth, that's exactly how it was done last year and the previous year. Same type structure. Any other questions on page 11? Page 12, Atlantic Specialty, and this is going to be paired up with Chubb as well on the property or a portion of it. Atlantic Specialty purchased Britt, which is who the program was with last year, so you could look at this as your incumbent option. That is going to line up. I'm going to pedal through some coverage differences here in a moment, but that is going to line up coverage-wise very close to how it did last year. That option is at 902, about $52,000 higher than the option with Argonaut and Chubb. Likely not the direction you're going to go, but we did just want to illustrate that for proposal purposes and out of respect for the incumbent, they have provided cover for a number of years.
And you stated you're going to go over some of the examples, because in other words, some of these have got $25,000 deductibles. The one that is a less total number, though, has $10,000. So
Correct.
You're going to explain that, okay?
Yeah, and we can move some of those deductibles within reason. It's just when they send us their proposal, they may not be filed for the exact same deductibles, and those are going to range anywhere between $5,000 and $25,000.
My only point in bringing it up is, you know, if you're paying $15,000 per automobile and a deductible that you're totaling, and you total out 10 of them, then all of a sudden you've reached the differences in the premium totals. That was my only point in
Great point.
referencing that.
And no doubt. And the last option is going to be hard to, you know, the first and the last option are going to be your, I think, the two we have to decide between. And Liberty's deductible is a $5,000 option, which is a lower option. It's hard to ignore the benefits of that deductible. And again, we may pedal through this and say, okay, we want to raise that from 5 to 10, but trying to keep things as close to apples for the carriers that are providing numbers. And we would have 15 sheets in here if we outlined all those different deductible options, but great point. Any questions on page 12? Page 13 is going to illustrate a comprehensive all lines proposal from Liberty Mutual. They're offering terms for everything, including the property. There are some coverage differences I'm going to pedal through here, but you're looking at their numbers are within $400 of the Argonaut and Chubb proposal. And this speaks to the point I spoke with some of you and we talked about the loss ratios that carriers write to. You know, if they're all using the same loss data, they're all using the same exposures, theoretically they should be relatively close depending on what their underwriting appetite is. You know, we're going to push them to underwrite as close as we can to a 60% loss ratio. If you take this number along with Argonaut's numbers, you're looking at a premium underwritten to a 54% loss ratio. Now, from an underwriting methodology, they want that number as close to 40 as possible. And if you would have looked at your loss data, we did have some favorable development in a large claim that we were, and again, our county attorneys did a good job bringing resolution to that. But that took a large number off of a reserve, so that positive development certainly helped bring that number down. So as much as I would like to say, we did all of that. That number, it improved your overall loss ratio from the low 90s, somewhere to around 80%, which is favorable. That, and I'm going to say the training that Govar and Greg Pattison did, that showed well to Liberty. They did spend some time at the jail. Everything, hats off to our sheriff, Brad Robinson. Those loss control surveys went really well. Those are some things that happen behind the scenes that y'all may not necessarily see on a day-to-day basis, but when they're going out and inspecting, they're looking at protocol, procedures, the things that we're doing every day that keeps employees and the public safe. All of those, I believe we will actually walk away from those with very little or no recommendations, knock on wood, which is good. But yeah, if you have underwritten these to a 40% loss ratio, you would have been looking at a number somewhere in the 950,000 number. So we're really about $100,000 less than where we really pictured we would be today. And a lot of that developed over the last 6 months. So again, I'm not trying to overly spend a 6% increase, but where we were sitting, it's much better than where we would have been. Notable differences, if I can, I'm gonna utilize, gonna really just drill down and compare Liberty's numbers compared to Argonaut's and Chubb's. Liberty's $1 million, you'll see they've got a $1 million limit for sexual abuse that is not indicated on the Argonaut proposal. They offer an employment practices liability limit of $4 million versus $1 million. EPLI is your wrongful termination, harassment, discrimination coverage. Liberty builds in a $4 million limit, which is an impressive limit. Property-wise, and these are some of the small things that can be a substantial difference in the event of what we call a catastrophic loss, a major fire, major wind event that hits Carroll County. Liberty has no co-insurance provision compared to where the Argonaut policy does on the property. Co-insurance is a penalty for being underinsured at the time of a loss. And for ease of this conversation, think about whatever percentage you're underinsured by, whatever that claim payment would be reduced by the same percentage. What worries us in times like this where construction costs are so high, what it would cost you to rebuild a building today compared to what it cost 12 to 18 months ago is a very different number. So if that co-insurance provision is applied to the policy and you're underinsured, it can have a very negative effect on what your claim payment would be. So from our perspective, we want to basically negotiate away co-insurance wherever possible, which we were able to do with Liberty. So point of conversation, co-insurance is a bad thing for all practical purposes.
Now, didn't we discuss this last year where we talked about the individual facilities and, calling into question, not saying there was anything wrong, but there was a lot of facilities there wondering what those true dollar figures were, and I think the reassurance was that the umbrella policy would kick in if there was some kind of differentiation. So are you talking about something outside of the umbrella itself on top of being underinsured, or are you talking about each specific line item?
Two components, and as usual, you're spot on, but instead of an umbrella, it's a blanket. Umbrella's over the casualty lines, but similar just on your property coverages. So you do have a blanket limit that goes over, think about having a bucket you're pulling out of for $142 million versus each one of those 54 locations having a separate limit. And Liberty, that was my next point, Liberty does offer a blanket limit, which is what you want. It does give you some peace of mind. For the record, I will always encourage you to insure the value per location. That's what enables us to be able to negotiate these terms, which are favorable terms on the policy. What you can have is an underwriter look at that and say, okay, this building is X amount of square feet constructed out of these items. You're not carrying enough limits on that for us to feel comfortable offering blanket limits or suspending co-insurance. We have not gotten pushback on that, but you're correct. The peace of mind is that you're not pulling out of individual buckets for each 54 locations. You're pulling off of a $142 million bucket that is a limit that where all 54 of those locations total up to. You're spot on. That's exactly what we discussed last year. Good memory. So really, you want to make sure your limits are blanketed. You want to make sure there's no co-insurance provision wherever possible. Sometimes you can't. Your current policy right now has co-insurance. But wherever possible, you want to negotiate that out of the policy. Then you want replacement costs, which that is obviously part of these policies. So when you're building a property policy, those are the three things that you want, and we have all three of those with the Liberty option. Again, taking nothing from Argonaut, it is a competitive proposal, just trying to point out the differences between the two.
I have a question. Under law enforcement liability, on the Liberty Mutual, it says line of duty death benefit. There's no line of duty death benefit under Liberty Mutual?
Correct, and Commissioner, that was my next point. And so I've told you the positives for Liberty. There are, I'm going to say, 2 negatives to Liberty. If you compare that to Argonaut, that is one of them. There's no line of duty benefit. There's a $50,000 death benefit for any fatalities in the line of duty that Argonaut has on their policy, which is it's a nice offering that Argonaut does. Liberty simply, we pushed for it. Liberty simply does not have the filing to do. Very important to have that. I'll tell you, it is life insurance, disability, those coverages are typically better suited either on a work comp policy or, on the benefits portion of the coverages. You will typically not see it on the property and casualty side, which is what we're talking about here, but it is something that Argonaut offers, which is a nice add-on to the policy. But I would tell you, you would typically see that on the other side of the insurance house, which is the life and health side. And then the other is med pay on the automobile. There's a $5,000 med pay. That would be any passengers in a car. It's a no-fault coverage. Relatively low limit. It's not anything that would concern me greatly, but it is a difference in coverage.
On that same topic of the Sheriff Department that Commissioner Fuller was just discussing, we recently approved, I think at our last meeting, to increase the safety measures inside the jail facility and the mezzanines where there's open floors.
Yes.
So is that something that could be taken into consideration since we approved that, or is that got to be physically in place before they would consider?
Already done. Y'all were able to point that out to me ahead of time, and when Liberty sent their loss control engineer to the jail week before last, it is not done, but it was noted in the report that the dollars had been approved and they were moving forward with it. Okay. Commissioner Chance, any of those things like that, I can't tell you how much we appreciate getting that information ahead of time. It does allow us, our job is to put to make sure the operations of Carroll County are presented in a favorable light to underwriters. It needs to be accurate, it needs to be true, it needs to be right, and it is. But things like that go a long way when we're negotiating with the underwriters. And that was made
Thank
clear.
You.
Bet.
So I've got a few questions. So if you take, let's just say, if you did a schematic where you have listed the differences between the Argonaut and the Liberty, I'm trying to go through here and identify all those. There are a bunch. And then you weigh that against our claims history, and then you say, where would we come out better monetarily? So, we're talking about individual differences, but I get no grand overall schematic. There are several differences. So, like up here in the general liability, healthcare and social services, on Liberty, there's no coverage. On the Argonaut, there's $1 million. You did talk about the sexual abuse. That's different, $1 million versus no coverage. There's, like we were talking about the line of duty death benefit difference. There's the medical payments and the auto liability that you talked about. There's, the way I understand it, what drives a lot of our premium cost is the collision coverage under auto liability. So for the Liberty Mutual, there's $5,000 physical damage collision deductible, and with the Argonaut, it's $25,000, and so on. There's probably several more, so I'm kind of lost in that. I can go through and identify all the differences, but it seems like there are a couple areas, the collision damage being a big one, and then the general liability. And there's also the property all locations, which Liberty Mutual has $142 million blanket limit, and the other one has only $37 million blanket limit, and then you mentioned the co-insurance and so on. One has no co-insurance. But I'm just wondering, overall then, if there are 14 differences, and given our claims history, where are we going to come out better?
To give you that specific number, I've got a little homework to do, but if you applied, say, a $25,000 deductible to both, you would be looking at somewhere between a $15,000 to $25,000 premium reduction on either one of those. We put in the lower deductible option just because your claims frequency would lead you to believe that those premium savings aren't enough. You know, there's some money in the piggy bank now for reserves for deductibles. It may be better to keep those reserves and spend the additional $15,000, $20,000 on the premium, unless you can just tell me for sure you're not going to have the claims, which is very difficult to do based on your loss history. So, you know, as a premium savings, if you tried to get those deductibles apples to apples where you are today, you would probably be looking at, I'm going to say, an average of a $20,000 difference if you move those.
And I am concerned, I guess, about that particular thing, the collision physical damage under our autos, because when we talked a few months ago, and I know you talked with other commissioners as well, it seemed like that single thing was driving a lot of, as you mentioned, our potential increase in the premium. So I would say, yes, we've got to get our accident history down, but what have we done, and what more can we do, or how much more can we do of what we have done to get that down, or to the rate of occurrence? And I forget the numbers you told me, but where a normal, if you would, rate of occurrence would result in a score of 46 or something, we were at 247 or whatever it was like way up high. I mean, it's not like, we got a couple more accidents. No, we've got a lot more. And so what are we doing are we taking advantage of everything, and are we pressing it to take advantage in as short a time as possible to address that, I guess, to get our occurrence rate down, because it's way up there and it shouldn't be.
I don't want to steal Michael's thunder,
Okay.
because he's gonna talk to that point in just a moment, but I will commend you. We've had multiple training sessions with the county, and I strongly encourage leadership and department heads to allow us to continue to come in there and provide those services. This is going to sound cliche, but safety is not something that changes overnight. Now, I can spin this in a way, do you look at your frequencies down this year, which is great, and it'd be easy for me to stand up here and say, well, because of what we did, it's down. I don't like using the word luck in a sense of good luck or bad luck, either one. I think it's a direct result of habits and practices you put into place. I do believe that. So as we continue to work with the county, and it's no different, if you go to one safety meeting every 5 years, it's hard to affect behavior. But if you're doing them on a quarterly basis, I mean, you see billboards on the trucks, you see signs within manufacturing plants, think safety. You start to create a culture where your employees truly do, buy into the program. And that's what we ask you to let us do. So I know everybody looks at J. Smith Lanier MMA and says, hey, these are our insurance guys, but I always challenge our clients is don't just think about us as insurance. We're as much of a risk management provider as anything else. There's not many firms that we staff, Michael, 8 full-time loss control engineers that do exactly what we've been doing for you. But whether it's municipal, manufacturing, distribution, we offer those services to most of our clients, and we certainly lay that out there for Carroll County, and we're glad to do it. So. And if you want, I'll be happy to take any more questions, but Michael may be able to speak to that point a little bit better.
But what you're saying from a premium standpoint, you feel we'd be better off taking the lower deductible, given our fairly consistent accident history, I guess.
Correct. I do, based on the numbers now, because it's there's just not enough bang for your buck. If you put it $20,000 in the bank, to your point, you're going to end up paying that out in a deductible, because that's taking it from, say, a $5,000 or $10,000 deductible to a $25,000. 2 claims, you burn through that. And now you fast forward 5 years, and your frequency and the amount of losses, dollars per loss that you're having are lower. It's a different scenario. But based on what we see on your history, it's hard for me not to recommend, that deductible. Property, if you want to bump that, your frequency on the property is low. What's really upside down is the auto, right? So we want to, and that's where Liberty's numbers were able to be a little bit more favorable. You take a profitable line and you mix it with an unprofitable line, so you're feeding them premium through the property to offset, the loss ratio on the auto. Because that number's still 148%, I think, even with the positive development on a large claim we had this year. So,
But we're in a good spot with that regardless, because the lower premiums also have the lower deductibles in average, as I'm glancing through this, first time I've been able to see it.
Correct.
Where typically you may have a higher end premium, but they've got the lower deductible, so really that's working in our favor regardless.
yeah. And the middle option, Atlantic Specialty, I'm a big fan of the underwriter. Her name's Sharon, works with our intermediary Bob, and she's done a great job on the account. But you do look at that, and they're the ones that have paid some of those claims, and it's just harder for them to compete with the other two. But at the end of the day, that's a $54,000 difference. That's taxpayer dollars that you've got to recognize. And that's what our goal was, is we went to the market as broad as we felt like we could this year. I know people were wanting to see different options, as they should, and we wanted to make sure we brought everyone to the table that we possibly could. And you showed well this year.
Did you give us the loss ratio? Did you tell us that?
The total loss ratio, including property, is 61% now. That's with the favorable development. And again, Commissioner Fuller, if you remember, property now is primarily written by Chubb. Liberty's doing both of them. So if you took the property out of that number and you just looked at the casualty lines, you're probably going to be in the low 80s. And if you remember for our conversations, anything below 40 is awesome. That's really where you want to be. 40 to 60 is kind of that underwriting window. Once it moves north of 60, you've got what we would categorize as a temperature that we need to have some correction. But where we stood 4 months ago, I'll take 61.
I thought it was higher.
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
61.
We had one large claim develop favorably that where we were able to that moved that number down. So it's good. And that is some of the vehicles on our schedule, not to point any obvious ones out, but they're expensive. So if something happens to one of those, it takes one loss to create a really big number. If you look at it now, you're averaging about $460,000 in claims per year. 4 months ago, that would have been closer to $550,000. And that's the benchmark you use as a percentage to premium. The underwriters are going to want that 40 or below, right? And from my position, we're going to try to push that, to a higher loss ratio, because that brings the premiums down. And we're sitting, like I said, that's underwritten to about a 54% loss ratio.
So if it's underwritten at a 54% loss ratio, what is, in the ideal world, if you had a satisfactory level of a culture of safety and resulting history of claims and so on, what would be the benchmark ideal loss ratio?
Less than 40?
Okay.
Anything less than 40. Yeah, that puts all the chips on our side of the table, where it's very hard for an underwriter to poke a hole in your loss history. The insurance companies are profitable. It's going to put us in a position to, like I said, your premiums are based on your exposures, property values, automobiles, people, et cetera. So there's going to be a base premium for those exposures. What you don't want them to do is add rate on top of that to account for losses. So once you get south of that 40 number, it gives us a lot more leverage with markets. You have people, Commissioner Reynolds, you've got companies essentially raising their hand saying, hey, we would like to take a look at Carroll County because we know the loss history is favorable, well-run operation. And because listen, they're in the insurance company. I'm your agent or broker, but your Liberty Mutuals, your Argonauts, they're all in the business of they're for profits. So they want to underwrite a good risk. They want to charge you less premium, as crazy as that sounds. They just don't want to pay out losses. That way you both end up putting money in the piggy bank.
Okay.
Any questions? Thank you all for your time today. I'm going to turn it over to Michael for a minute. I know I'm probably over on time, but I'm going to turn it over to him. And again, he's our loss control engineer. Anything safety, risk management related, on the record, I'll say he is better than average. So, Michael, thank you.
It's on the record. I'll be brief since I know we're probably over time, but I just wanted to share some of our services we have available to y'all. I know we've done this in some of the past things, and I'll talk about when we've shared it to the safety committee, and then some of the services we've actually provided, and then some things I'd recommend going forward, and that's obviously a work in progress, and we can discuss that. The first page here on 14, this is just our online training platform. That's free for y'all to utilize. Currently, I think there have been like 3 completions in there from Carroll County, but it's something free for you to access. It's got, I would say, probably over like 350 courses at this point. It's English and Spanish, and it's all BLR content, business legal resources, similar to like a J.J. Keller. But that's something that's out there for you. I just wanted to share that part. On the next page, on 15, this is just kind of a service overview from what we can provide from a risk control and really day in and day out. And this was shared with the safety committee on, I believe, 8/13, which you'll see on the last page. But we did go through all of our resources, shared that, and then that's how we kind of got our initial action plan to get hopefully that loss reduction that we were looking for. And really, from my goal is I want to be your on-call risk control person, an extension of y'all. So we're here to help you, as much or as little, and we can get more engaged as we go. But really, we're here to help you. So whether that's training, we can review written programs, we can help you create those from scratch if we need to. Not really looking for the OSHA side since you're going to be exempt on that, but we do look at that from a best practice standpoint as well. So really we're here as an extension of your team, and y'all are lucky y'all have myself, and you have another risk control person assigned to you also with Greg Pattison, and we've both been active on your account. On this next page, this is just a little bit more on some of those courses that are in that training center, and it does have a little bit on page 15 on the side for our client portal. So your 2 real online resources that you have are that training center, and then our client portal is really like a document repository. We talked about building that culture and more constant safety reminders. Tons of that is in that client portal, and then y'all can always reach out to me if you're looking for something on a specific topic, or hey, let's plan out a whole list of things for the year, whatever the case is. So that'll all be in that client portal. The other thing they do have is an HR hotline, which is new, where I'm your at-call risk control person. We do have at-call HR consulting available through there for free as well, which I think is a pretty good tool, because I get a lot of HR questions that I honestly don't know the answer to. So that's another thing that's out there for you. And then on the last page, this would be kind of our service update overview of what we did in the past, and then looking forward to our future services. Greg, myself, and Newton were able to meet with the safety committee on 8/13. Longer, detailed, more overview of what we just talked about, where we shared services and kind of came up with our action plan. From that, really we looked at setting up, our main focus was the pro driver defensive driving sessions that we set up. That was 6 sessions over 2 days, and we trained 186 people. So that, I think, was a pretty big success, and we've seen some frequency reduction from that. That would be my first recommendation as we get that set up for 2021 going ahead. And then some other things that are available to you that we didn't do really in the past that we can do is we can set up some customized stuff. So the online materials that we have are generic, but we can also do some customized programs too, where we do the custom stuff in person, but I can upload that online if that's something y'all want as well. Or if you're doing something internally already on a completely different topic, we can do those too. So that's everything pretty quickly. Any questions for me, or y'all want more details on any areas?
Mr. Gover, I had met with Mr. Jennings a couple of months ago as well, and we talked about some different things. And one of the things that I realized, I guess, is there's even more what I'm calling specialty training. And like I went to the basic, you had a basic driver's, safety course that I kind of went through. It was a several-hour course that we did over at E911, but that there's a lot other training. So for me, I know the chairman and her staff will do a great job, running day-to-day operations, but I guess for me is I don't want to see this again in 12 months. I think we need to hold each other accountable. If you feel like the safety committee or the administration needs to be implementing at certain things through the year, I just want to make sure that we're doing that, and then on our end, we're doing what we can. And the other thing is, from a planning perspective, I know one of the things we had talked about was maybe even the possibility of cameras in certain vehicles, like maybe the fire department as well. And I know Commissioner McClendon was going to look at that at some point, but things that as we're trying to plan out spliced, if that comes to fruition, and I'm not saying that that will, but just, to me, this is a work in progress throughout the year. And here, again, I know the chairman and her staff will handle it, but for me, I would just like to see maybe quarterly updates or something. How are we progressing through the year, so we're not waiting 12 months in my seat to see what happened?
Yeah, we can do that. So quarterly updates going forward, and then how about an initial plan sent out as a follow-up from this? Would that work?
And do y'all have, I'm looking at the online platform, and in my job, you guys have come out and helped me with my drivers already and done some training, which has been great. Have some lined up already. So looking at the online platform, so you can monitor and track people as they get in their progress, and is there a place for supervisors to kind of be able to, their supervisors be able to look at their progress and see what's going on?
Yeah, so the generic system, really, if we're not doing custom stuff, which is kind of individual one-off, where you would get individual reporting stuff emailed to you, the generic platform that I mentioned where you see like the 300 courses, employees don't have to create a login. You use a hyperlink and an access code.
Gotcha.
And then they enter their name after they complete the quiz. And then you have an administrator account that y'all can all share access to view grades and certificates for everything. And then we can set up, if you want, going forward, some custom libraries, if you want, by department, new hire. There's a lot of opportunities there. Does that answer everything?
Mm-hmm.
Think about what Michael does, is the proactive part of it, and what the county attorneys do on the reactive part. They're the ones that are having to get engaged after a claim. Try to utilize him more with this, but more on the proactive side, so we don't have to use the reactive side as much.
Yeah, so as a follow-up or change, at least initially, I've got the quarterly updates and then kind of an initial follow-up service plan to everybody. How do y'all want me to communicate that out? Or is there a already set up way to do that?
Oh, yeah, probably just through me.
Okay.
And, because I know the safety committee meets quarterly, so we could make sure you're included. Stacy, that's fine if they come to, we can incorporate you into the quarterly safety committee meetings. I was just making myself a note on that.
Okay,
And
we can use that as our follow-up.
Come, make sure, see what we're doing, because there's things that are required by, federal, state government for FEMA, GEMA, things like that we're already doing to meet their criteria, so we just, that way you could know better what we are. Communication's hard when it's a lot of departments spread all over an entire county, but that would probably be a good start. This last year we did a great job in taking advantage of what you all offered we've never done before. So I'm very appreciative of that. So in answer to Clint, let's take it to the next level.
Okay.
So let's add you to our quarterly safety meetings. That's with fire, sheriff, several departments participate in that, and then we can start cross-training some more stuff here.
Definitely, yeah. And as you
HR's
mentioned-
in that, and we can have more
Yeah, we can
conversations.
hit definitely more topics than the driving only, for sure. Anything else on the risk control side, or any additional information?
I know one other thing on the property side that we had talked about, it's a very low loss ratio, but one of the things we had discussed, I think, is if we're going into buildings and we're regularly checking fire extinguishers or moving components with motors and stuff, making sure that we notate that, to have something in your file that gives you more evidence, if you will, of how the county's being proactive. And I think when we talked, Mr. Jennings, I think some of that probably is already happening. It just may need to be relayed to you what's available, so.
Yeah, I love, if you've got, you know, hear me okay? If you've got quarterly checklist or where people are going through, and usually things like fire extinguishers, suppression systems, those are done annually or quarterly. Any of those, if there is a way that made it to me, I will take any and all of that information you're willing to send to. And that's a lot of that's where the loss control visits bring a lot of that to light. And you should not have a high frequency of losses on your property. They're going to be more severity driven. You know, you may go, knock on wood, 10 years without loss, but then you have a severe wind event or a fire, and it's going to, you know, it's going to elevate that loss ratio for a moment. But that's also why we use a 5-year weighted balance, because you may have a bad year. Hopefully, you're going to have 4 other years to soften the blow without one bad year. Frequency will hurt you worse than severity, and that's where, kind of on the auto side, we've had both. We've had frequency and severity. It's kind of where.
Right. I'm just wanting to hold ourselves accountable. You know, we look at you to come back with a low premium, but I want to make sure we're doing everything to document that we can prove to you we're doing what we need to do as well. Anything additional that we can get to you, to your point.
You bet. I'll take it, Commissioner Chancellor. If you have it, please forward it on, and I'll encourage receipt of that information.
I think we're having a lot more conversations than we've had in the past. Newton dropped by at Christmas time just to say hello, and an hour and a half later, Alicia and I had him still in conversation. So I think we're doing better on both sides with conversation and sharing and making sure you know.
For sure.
So, and we went through this handbook last year, and so but with the COVID, it was very difficult to do some of the classes because of the COVID. And some of it was trying to get some online stuff. Well, we don't really have internet in some of our county facilities, you know, depending on where they are in the county. That's, you know, very, very common. McIntosh Park doesn't have any. So last week with the gas shortage, Public Works parked a lot of the vehicles for a few days, and they did some all-day trainings. So we're taking advantage of the moments that we're taking advantage of the negative moments and turning them into a positive. So.
I'll get calls on rainy days when drivers are typically or inclement weather where they can't drive. So good training day.
That's what we're doing some more of that and getting caught up on the paperwork and stuff. So I think it's just taking it to the next level. And it was like, oh, ding dong, you can be in the safety committee, so you can hear what we're required by state and federal, and that may check some more boxes off.
No, I think that's a great idea.
What would be an ideal time frame to get from a 61% loss ratio to 40% or less? I mean, could we realistically achieve that within a year?
A couple of years, yeah. I mean, you've got some that would need to fall off, but you do have one 5 years back once that falls off. And your current year, Commissioner Reynolds, has been favorable for the most part. So yeah, you could, you know, if you're sitting at a total of 61 now, and there's a benefit of having everything with one carrier from that scenario too, because we're looking at all lines, you're not having to share, you know, the benefit of that. You're able to share the benefit of that, the favorable loss ratio with the same carrier that's underwriting the auto. So realistically, 2 to 3 years. But yeah, I mean, if we could see if things trend how if we have another year like we have a negative year fall off. I don't want to tell you you're going to be below 40, but you would be below 60, which would be good. That just puts more of this last year. I mean, you move from a point of having to coerce carriers or to try to talk carriers into looking at it from a sense that, you know, what we're going to do. We're sitting at a point now where we can say we've already done these things. We've already held classes. We're moving things in the right direction in past tense rather than what we're going to do. A good underwriter is they'll appreciate what you say about what your plans are, but they actually want to see it in place, and they want to see it change behavior and see it change that loss ratio. So give it 2 or 3 years, and I mean, you even look at it this year. We had 3 full hoses. We didn't have that last year. So that's fine.
With the auto frequency too, if you look nationwide, auto accidents are up, by the way, pretty dramatically. So that is a nationwide trend. I forget the exact numbers, but you'll find out about it when we do our updated class for sure. But it's up pretty dramatically.
Commissioner Reynolds, even just, if you would have had a 15% loss ratio on your auto this year, it would have been hard for me to tell you that you're going to see a decrease in that line, just because where the rates are nationwide, and where I don't think there was a carrier in Georgia in 2019, maybe one, that turned a profit in Georgia. So if you look at Georgia as a whole,
Well-
it's been a very challenging state for insurers to
Yeah.
do business in.
Man, I've talked to our state representatives about that, and I said, hey, you guys got to go up against the Trial Lawyers Association and get some tort reform stuff going, because, I mean, every year, this is going up and up, and we're negligent in doing anything about it. I mean, and we're up in the, top 5, 6 states in the nation.
You're sixth. You're
Yeah.
fifth or sixth. In 2019, I think it was sixth, and I don't know if 20 numbers have come out yet, but prior to that, I don't think Georgia was ever on that.
Yeah, we're on
But it's been, have you seen the 20 numbers?
not the recent ones.
But yeah, it's not the direction that you want to go. And what that does, insurers see that, so, if you have an insurer like Liberty that's licensed in all 50 states, they do business everywhere. So they're going to pick the states, where do we want to focus and where do we want to write more business? Atlanta's got some challenges now. There's certain venues within Georgia that are a lot harder to write business in than where we are. We're arguably a pretty favorable venue.
Now, we had a survey come out, I'm sure it went to all the commissioners, it was like, what issue would you like to have addressed at the state level? And that was my issue. It's like, we got it for all the taxpayers. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yes, thank you. You have our support. We'll send you everything you need.
That's right. That's we're not just municipal, but all of our clients. We're saying, those are conversations that have got to be had at the state level to change that. So it's, yeah.
So for the purposes of our budget, you are recommending, if I understand correctly, Liberty Mutual. So we would, Stacy, correct me if I'm wrong, Alicia, so you're recommending Liberty Mutual, so Alicia would put this dollar amount into the budget that we would vote on in about 10 days, which would then give me the authorization to sign the contracts to start Liberty July 1st. So for the 6 commissioners, I guess, could we do a consensus that you want to go with their recommendation, or I think Alicia and I need a little direction here on where y'all want to go, or,
For me, to give an answer in the moment, just what I've been able to look through, here again, the first time being able to scan through it, I would agree that Liberty Mutual seems to be the most proficient as I'm trying to look here in 10 or 15 minutes. So I would feel comfortable with putting that number, just trying to assist you and the staff to move forward. But in the same note, before we vote, obviously I'd like time to go through the full document, but that's kind of where I'm sitting in the moment.
okay. So I just want to make sure, so probably we need to put the $400 difference, I believe, is what it is.
And they're both great options, and I hate to give you a tough decision, but
Okay.
it's hard to steer wrong with either one of them, but it's hard to overlook it. Just some of the enhancements on the property,
Okay.
and pointing out what Commissioner Fuller on the line of duty death benefit.
Yeah, that's-
That is something that Argonaut gives that Liberty doesn't. That could be taken into consideration. It's just, and I could have probably, Swede on that side may be able to look at something that takes the place of that. But like I said, that's typically something you see on the employee health and benefit side.
And I'm sure we have that, right?
We do have company paid life insurance, or
Okay.
county paid life insurance. So,
Yeah.
So for the purposes of the budget, we'll put the higher dollar amount in so that on the June 2nd meeting, when there's a motion for the budget, we've got ourselves covered. Should we have a second, where we actually vote on which company on the agenda for June? Okay, all right, so next Thursday is our work session. And then the following Tuesday, about 10 days from now, is June already. We will vote on the budget. So I will have on the agenda and for the work session discussion, the two choices. Well, there's three choices, but really the two. And I'll expect a motion and a second for this at the June meeting for which one you all would like to go with. And we'll vote. Does that sound like a plan to all of y'all? So I encourage you, if you have any other questions during the next week, to reach out to Michael, reach out to Newton with any questions you may have, and that you can then share whatever information at the work session that you've learned, if you have any other questions on these two. Does that work for y'all?
Most of y'all have my contact information. My cell phone's on my card. If you need it, let me know. But welcome, call anytime to discuss any questions you have.
And
Great.
for me and Greg, you can find ours on the last page.
The print quality on that document was bad. For whatever reason, our printer was talking back this morning. My apologies.
Good, I thought it was my glasses.
It was not, we tried to, that's what you do for printing today.
So if there's not any further questions for Newton, Michael, or Bobby, I would now like for the board to enter into an executive session. We're going to discuss real estate. For the public, we do not expect to take any official action after the executive session. However, we will convene after the executive session to continue discussing the FY 2021-2022 proposed budget. So if I'm understanding correctly from IT, we will adjourn this meeting. It'll go to just the county logo screen, is that correct? Or it'll just end? And for those that are watching that want to know when we're coming back, you'll get notified. So I don't know if we'll be there 15 minutes, an hour. I don't have that answer right this moment, but we will reconvene in a little while. So do I have a motion to convene to executive session to discuss real estate?
Motion.
Do I have a second? Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed?
Vote passed 6-0.
Okay, we will leave now. We are headed over to the